In the summer of 1994, a quiet rural town in Ohio was shaken by the sudden disappearance of a grandfather and his 6-year-old granddaughter. They vanished while playing frisbee in their backyard, the fence gate locked, no tracks leading out. 15 years later, a new family opens the old shed behind that same yard. Inside, they find the red frisbee, the child's tiny shoes, and the old man's glasses, placed neatly on a dusty table. But buried under the dirt floor is something that would lead investigators to a truth more disturbing than anyone ever imagined. The official story, the one that lived on missing posters and faded local news clips, said they must have wandered off into the trees behind the yard. Maybe Grandpa Raymond had a dizzy spell. Maybe little Emily chased the frisbee too far. Maybe they both slipped into that patch of woods and just disappeared. That's what the sheriff told reporters back when the cameras still cared. No sign of struggle, no signs of foul play. Just a tragedy. The woods behind the Bailey house weren't big, a narrow strip of pine that stopped dead at an old barbed wire fence. Beyond that, nothing but acres of flat farmland. You could stand on the back porch and see the whole stretch clear as day. That was the part that stuck in everyone's throat. Where could they have gone? The Baileys were quiet people, the kind who never missed Sunday service or turned away a neighbor in need. Raymond Bailey had worked 40 years at the local sawmill, same town he was born in. His daughter, Beth, moved back home with little Emily after her marriage split up. She'd thought it would be good for Emily to have a backyard and a grandpa who spoiled her rotten. And for the first 6 months, it was. On June 4th, 1994, they ate lunch together, grilled cheese sandwiches, apple slices, lemonade on the back steps. Emily loved that frisbee, bright red, with a black scuff on one edge where Grandpa accidentally hit the mailbox the week before. Beth watched them from the kitchen window. Just after 2, she went to switch the laundry. By the time she stepped back out, the yard was empty. No screaming, no barking dog. The frisbee was gone too. Beth ran through the grass barefoot, calling until her throat was raw. By sunset, the sheriff's truck was parked in the driveway, lights spinning blue in the dusk. The first search started that night. Flashlights bobbing through the trees, neighbors stomping through shoulder-high weeds. They found nothing, not a shoe, not a scrap of cloth, not even Grandpa's glasses. Raymond Bailey was nearly blind without them. The next morning, the local paper snapped a photo of Beth, hunched on the porch swing, hugging Emily's favorite stuffed rabbit. The caption read, "Family holds hope." But hope turned to rumor before the week was out. Some folks said Grandpa must have wandered onto Old Man Carter's land. He'd been feuding with Raymond over a fence line for years. Others whispered about Beth's ex-husband. He'd skipped town right before Emily's birthday, left behind debts and a bruised reputation. Deputies knocked on doors. Search dogs came and went. TV vans showed up, then moved on when there was nothing left to film. By September, the flyers were rain-bleached ghosts on telephone poles. Beth kept searching long after the cops gave up. Every Saturday she'd walk the fence line, pushing through thorn bushes and knee-high brush. Some nights she'd sleep on the porch light glowing like a beacon no one ever saw. She put up reward signs, handed out photocopies at the grocery store. And every year on June 4th, she'd stand at the edge of the yard watching that empty patch of grass like maybe this time they'd come back through. 15 years went by. The house changed hands twice. Beth couldn't stand to live there after 2001. She said the empty yard felt like a grave she had to mow. She left the town, left the state, remarried somewhere up north where people didn't point or pity her in the checkout line. The last owner before the bank took it back was a loner named Dwight Furlong. Didn't talk to neighbors. Let the yard go wild. He locked the old shed with a rusted padlock, said it was full of junk he'd get to one of these days. He never did. In the spring of 2009, the property went to auction. Some young couple bought it sight unseen, drawn in by the wide yard, the cheap price, the promise of good bones. First day they pulled up, they found the shed half buried in wild vines and old leaves. The lock was so rusted they cracked it with a hammer. Inside, the light barely touched the back wall. Cobwebs thick as felt. Broken garden tools, old oil cans, a rotted lawn chair. And on a weathered table in the corner, a small pair of children's tennis shoes, faded blue with rainbow laces. Beside them, a pair of thick brown-rimmed glasses, lenses smudged but unbroken. And balanced dead center, the red frisbee. Same scuff on the edge, same black line where it kissed the mailbox. One of them stepped forward, flashlight beam shaking. That's when they saw the ground, a shallow hump beneath the table, like the earth itself had been turned over not so long ago. A mound, maybe 2 feet wide, just enough to hide something you didn't want found. The new owner dialed the sheriff's office before they even backed out of the shed. Within an hour, 2 patrol cars rolled up. An old deputy, the same rookie who'd walked the fence line 15 years earlier, stepped inside, looked at the frisbee, and felt something shift in his gut that hadn't moved in years. He stepped closer, boot toe brushing the mound of dirt. He thought of that yard in '94, the clear sky, the empty fence line, the sound of Beth's voice echoing through the trees. He called it in for backup. Outside, the young couple stood by the mailbox, holding each other's hands so tight their knuckles went white. They could see the backyard through the weeds, the same patch of grass where the little girl and her grandpa vanished without a sound. Somewhere deep in the shed, under that hump of dirt, the past was waiting to breathe again. They roped off the backyard before sunset, yellow tape fluttering against the fence posts like plastic flags. Sheriff's trucks lined the dirt road in front of the old Bailey house, tires sinking into soft spring mud. By nightfall, half the town knew something had been found, or was about to be. Inside the shed, Deputy Mike Henley kept his boot planted near the mound, not daring to touch it again. He'd been 23 when they disappeared. Rookie badge, fresh haircut, boots so new they squeaked on the porch steps when he knocked on Beth Bailey's door. Now he was pushing 40. Same badge, same soft ache in his chest every time the anniversary rolled around. Back then, he'd been the one to find the shoe print near the fence line, a single child's footprint facing toward the yard, not away. He remembered pointing it out to the lead detective, who'd waved him off. "Kids run in circles," the man had said. "Means nothing." But Mike had kept that footprint in his head all these years, the way some people remember song lyrics or old girlfriends. Facing home, like Emily might have been trying to come back. The forensics team arrived just after 9. They set up work lights that turned the inside of the shed into a stage, every cobweb a curtain, every shadow a secret waiting to drop. They photographed the shoes, the glasses, the frisbee from every angle. They bagged each one separately, sealed them up in brown evidence envelopes that looked too flimsy to hold 15 years of silence. When they broke the ground, Mike stepped outside. He didn't want to see it. He stood by the mailbox instead, watching the blue and red swirl of the cruiser lights flicker across the old swing set. He remembered pushing his own kid there once, back when the Baileys still had barbecues and Beth still smiled. An hour passed, then 2. The forensics lead, a heavy-set man named Travers, finally ducked out of the shed, gloves stained dark at the fingertips. He walked over, breathing hard. "Henley," he said, voice low enough the young couple couldn't hear. "You might want to step in for this." Mike wiped his palms on his uniform pants. His boots left faint tracks in the dewy grass as he crossed the yard, the same grass Beth Bailey had stood on every June 4th. The shed door hung half open, a single bulb dangling from a nail inside, swinging like a nervous heartbeat. Under the table, the mound was gone. In its place was a shallow pit, about 2 feet deep. Inside it, laid out neat as Sunday shoes, was an old wooden box, maybe the size of a small cooler. Hand-built, splintered at the edges, sealed with rusted hinges and a tarnished latch. No name, no note, just old wood and old secrets. Travers lifted it with both hands, set it down on a plastic sheet beside the table. One of the younger techs tried the latch, but it wouldn't budge. They pried it open with a crowbar, the metal squealing like an animal in pain. Inside, there was no body. No bones, no sign of human remains at all. Instead, there were papers, dozens of folded pages, yellowed and fragile, some handwritten, some typed on a battered old typewriter. On top of the stack lay a single photograph, black and white, edges curled with age. Mike leaned in, squinting. The photo showed a backyard, this backyard, 15 years ago, maybe more. There was Grandpa Raymond, unmistakable in his work shirt and suspenders, kneeling in the grass. Little Emily was beside him, mid-laugh, frisbee in hand. And standing at the far edge of the yard, half-cropped by the photo's right border, was a man Mike didn't recognize. No one had ever mentioned another person being there that day. Mike lifted the photo with gloved fingers. On the back, in neat block letters, someone had written, June 4th. 1:50 p.m. That timestamp made something crawl under his skin. He knew the official record. The neighbor had said she saw Grandpa and Emily playing at 2:10, the last confirmed sighting. But if this photo was real, someone was in the yard 20 minutes earlier, and someone else was close enough to take the picture. Travers was already snapping photos, bagging each page like it was gold leaf. Mike flipped through the stack, careful not to smudge the old ink. Some pages were receipts, hardware store, lumber yard, a pawnshop ticket for a hunting rifle. Others were notes in Raymond Bailey's neat, blocky handwriting, odd reminders. Call Carter, re-boundary line. Don't tell Beth, too dangerous. Halfway down the pile was a single page that stopped Mike cold. The ink was faded, but the words were plain as day. If you find this, I didn't want this for Emily. I tried. God help me. I tried. Mike folded the box shut again, his hands trembling. Outside, the young couple was peeking in from the shed door, wide-eyed and whispering. The wind shifted, carrying a soft rustle through the overgrown grass, the same grass Grandpa and Emily had crossed all those years ago. He looked at the frisbee, now sealed away in its plastic bag. The scuff mark caught the work light, a crescent moon of chipped paint that felt like it had been waiting all this time. If you find this... Mike stepped out of the shed, the photo burning a hole in his mind. He needed to find Beth Bailey. She was the only one who might know who that shadowy figure in the photo was, and why Raymond Bailey thought someone might come for his granddaughter. He didn't notice the young husband staring past him, eyes fixed on the half-dug pit. "Deputy?" the man asked, voice cracking. "Shouldn't that be deeper?" Mike turned back. The dirt looked uneven, a fresh seam of dark soil cutting beneath the spot where the box had been. Almost like the box hadn't been buried alone. The work lights buzzed overhead. The wind pushed the shed door wider, hinges moaning. For a moment, Mike thought he heard a voice whisper his name, soft as a child's breath through the trees. He stepped forward, squinting at the earth. "Get the shovels," he said. "We're not done yet." The second pit didn't give up its secret easily. By the time they cleared the top layer, it was well past midnight. The work lights flickered every few minutes, drawing moths that battered their wings against the bright bulbs until they burned out, one by one. The young couple stayed huddled on the back steps, wrapped in a blanket they'd pulled from their car. Neither of them said much. Every now and then, the woman would flinch when a shovel struck something solid under the dirt. Mike Henley stayed close to the edge of the pit, boots sinking into the soft earth. He could feel his pulse ticking in his throat, same heavy, dragging beat he'd felt when he was 23, standing on that same patch of grass, hoping to see a small shoe sticking out from a bush so at least there'd be something. When the shovel finally hit wood, again, the sound was different. Hollow. Larger than the first box. A deep, dull thunk that pulled every conversation to silence. Travers knelt down, brushing soil away with gloved hands, slow as a surgeon. Inch by inch, a crude wooden crate emerged. Rough-cut planks, stained dark around the edges. No lock this time, no neat hinges, just nails bent over raw wood as if someone had closed it in a hurry. The deputy holding the flashlight leaned closer, whispering under his breath. Mike caught two words. "Hope not." Travers worked a crowbar along the seam. The wood moaned like something alive, splitting just enough for stale air to seep out, earthy, sour, heavy with the taste of rot. Mike turned his head, fighting the urge to step back. The smell carried 15 years of silence, pressed into old wood and wet dirt. When the lid cracked open, they all leaned in, bracing for bones, clothes, the final proof that Raymond and Emily Bailey had never left this yard at all. But what they found wasn't what any of them expected. Inside the crate lay another box, metal this time, battered green like an old army footlocker. Next to it, wrapped in rotting cloth, was a bundle of what looked like old children's drawings. Stick figures, crude shapes, the kind you'd see taped to a fridge door. Mike lifted one free, holding it under the light. A red circle. A stick girl. A big shape behind her. Square, blocky, scribbled with dark crayon so hard it ripped the page. Emily's name was scrawled at the bottom in clumsy block letters. He set it aside and touched the metal box. Cold, heavier than it looked. The latch popped with a soft metallic click. Travers leaned closer, eyes narrowed. Inside was a gun. A small revolver, its barrel rusted near the muzzle. Wrapped around the grip was an oily rag. Stuffed beneath it was a folded scrap of newspaper, yellowed and brittle at the edges. Mike slipped the paper free. The headline was from 1993, Local Farmer Missing After Boundary Dispute. The photo showed an older man with sunburned cheeks and a squinting smile. His name was Carter. Old Man Carter. Mike's mind kicked back 15 years, dredging up every rumor that had run through this town. Carter and Raymond had been neighbors for decades, fought over a fence line that zigzagged through the backwoods. Some said Carter was a drunk, quick to swing a shovel if someone crossed onto his patch. Others said he'd gone broke, blamed Raymond for stealing work or water or who knew what. When Carter disappeared, the town had barely noticed. A drifter, they'd called him. No family left to claim him. But the gun was a different story. Mike turned it in his hand, careful not to smear the old grime. Grandpa Raymond Bailey hadn't owned a gun, not officially. He'd always said he hated them, never trusted himself with one in the house with a kid around. So whose gun was this? He looked back at the crude drawing, the big dark block behind Emily's stick figure. The more he stared, the less it looked like a shed. The angles were wrong. It looked more like a truck, or maybe a trailer. A hand on his shoulder snapped him out of the fog. Travers nodded toward the couple on the porch. "They're asking about the family, the girl's mother. You think she's going to come down for this?" Mike exhaled, breath fogging in the cold night air. Beth. He hadn't spoken to her in over a decade, not since she left town for good. Rumor said she'd changed her name, moved somewhere up north, tried to pretend this patch of earth didn't exist anymore. He doubted she even knew the property had sold. He pulled his phone from his pocket. The number was still there, tucked deep in an old contact list he'd never cleaned out. He thumbed it open, stared at it for a second. His thumb hovered over the call button. And then something caught his eye. Just past the swing set, near the line of broken fence posts. A figure, small, slight, moving between the tree trunks. He blinked hard, half convinced it was his eyes playing tricks in the harsh floodlight spill. But when he squinted, the shape was still there, a girl's silhouette, long hair drifting over a pale dress, barefoot in the cold grass. She paused near the swing, head tilted just so, as if she was watching him. Mike stepped forward, breath lodged in his throat. He wanted to shout, but the word wouldn't come. The wind rustled the branches overhead, and the figure flickered. There, one heartbeat, gone the next. He looked back at the drawing in his hand. Emily's crude stick figure, the big dark thing behind her. The same small round shape in the stick girl's hand. The frisbee. The same frisbee that now sat in a plastic bag in the sheriff's cruiser. Mike pocketed his phone. Beth would have to wait. Right now, the past was moving, and if he didn't follow, he knew he'd never catch up. He stepped off the porch, eyes fixed on the broken fence line, the darkness beyond. He didn't see the porch light flicker behind him, didn't hear the quiet click of the metal box lid snapping shut in Trevor's hands, or the soft, unmistakable clink of a bullet rattling loose inside. Mike didn't sleep that night. After the shed was sealed off again, the backyard turned into an island of floodlights and cold dew. Deputies came and went in hushed pairs, carrying bags of dirt, plastic-wrapped evidence, and the old footlocker sealed inside a new chain of custody box. The new owners stayed in their truck at the end of the drive, staring out at the house they hadn't even unpacked a single box in yet. Mike sat on the back steps, boots on the grass where Beth Bailey used to stand with her coffee cup, staring at that same patch of fence every dawn like maybe it would finally open up and spit her father and daughter back out. He watched the sky shift from black to purple to the dull, aching gray of early morning. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the silhouette by the swing set, the way it stood, tilted just like Emily did in old photos, as if she was trying to figure out a puzzle only she could see. A soft knock at the front door snapped him out of it. One of the rookies, Torres, a kid barely out of the academy, poked his head around the porch corner. "Deputy Henley?" Torres said. "There's a woman here to see you. Says her name's Beth." Mike felt a squeeze in his chest, like his ribs pulled tight all at once. He stood too fast, boots scraping the concrete. The swing set creaked behind him as the wind shifted. Inside, the old Bailey house smelled like stale paint and dry floorboards. The living room was bare except for a coil of extension cord left by the new owners and a single folding chair someone had dragged in from the garage. Beth Bailey stood by the front window, hands jammed into the pockets of a faded denim jacket. Her hair was shorter than he remembered, flecked with gray at the temples, but her eyes were exactly the same. Sharp, exhausted, searching for something that had been gone a long time. "Beth," Mike said, his voice rough from a night without sleep. She turned, mouth twitching at the corner, like she couldn't decide whether to smile or spit. "Mike Henley, God, you look old." He huffed a breath that might have been a laugh. "You look good," he lied. She didn't smile. She stepped closer, the floorboards creaking under her sneakers. "Is it true?" she asked, voice low. "The shed, the frisbee, is it them?" Mike rubbed the back of his neck. "It's theirs, Beth, no question." He paused, then added, "And we found more. Papers, a gun, something about Carter." Her eyes flickered at the name. "Carter? Old man Carter? He's dead?" "He vanished the year before they did. We think he's tied up in this somehow. Raymond, your dad, he left notes, receipts, some kind of—" He trailed off, the right word stuck behind his teeth. "Plan?" she offered, her voice cutting through him. He nodded. "Yeah, maybe." She sat in the folding chair, elbows on her knees, staring at the scuffed floor like she could see all the footprints pressed into the wood. "He told me he'd take her out for an hour," she said. "Lunch, then the yard. I asked him to keep her close. He said he would. He promised he'd never let her out of his sight." She let out a low, hollow laugh that had no humor left in it. "I should have known better." Mike lowered himself onto an upturned milk crate someone had left by the front door. "Beth, the box, the drawing. There's something else. Someone else? A man in a photo standing by the yard. You ever seen him?" She looked up sharply. "What man?" He pulled the evidence envelope from his jacket pocket. He'd taken it with him before the sheriff's office boxed everything for storage. He slid the black and white photo across the dusty coffee table. Beth picked it up with both hands, turning it toward the slanted morning light. Her eyes darted over Grandpa Raymond, over Emily's half smile, over the fence line that had turned into a ghost town for 15 years. When she reached the shadowy figure at the edge, her fingers tightened until the photo curled under her grip. "I don't know him," she whispered, "but I know that coat." Mike leaned forward. "Whose?" She didn't answer right away. She pressed the photo to her chest, eyes locked on something far away, something behind him, behind the walls, behind the last 15 years of pretending this house didn't exist. "That coat," she said slowly, voice trembling now, was my ex's, Emily's father, Stephen. Mike felt the floor tilt under him. "You're sure?" "I'm sure," she said. "He always wore that damn Army surplus jacket. He thought it made him look tough. I haven't seen him since before. He left town a week before they went missing." Mike's mind started spinning. The custody fights, the unpaid debts, the old rumor that Stephen had threatened Raymond. Beth looked at him, eyes wet but blazing. "I told the sheriff back then. I told them he'd do something stupid. They said he was long gone, no trace, no proof. And now this." She slammed the photo on the table so hard it slid off the edge and fluttered to the floor. Mike picked it up, fingertips brushing the cold tile. The man's face was half shadow, but the coat was clear as day. Big flap pockets, shoulder patches, the kind every farm kid around here used to buy for cheap after the base closed. He slipped the photo back into its sleeve, his mind racing. If Stephen was here that day, if he was in that yard while Raymond and Emily were playing frisbee, then everything they'd believed about that summer afternoon was wrong. Beth wiped her face with the back of her hand. "He's still alive, Mike. I know it. He's out there somewhere. He did this." Mike wanted to argue, to say there were too many holes, too many gaps in the story. But the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, he knew Beth Bailey had never been wrong about her family. A knock on the doorframe pulled them both around. Torres stood there, hat in his hands. "Deputy, the lab's on the line. They got a match off the gun." Mike stood, boots creaking. "Tell me." Torres swallowed, glancing at Beth like he wished he could vanish into the floor. "It's registered to Stephen Miller, bought in '92, pawned in '93. Beth let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, raw, ragged, punched through with 15 years of anger she'd buried under bad jobs and cold winters up north. Mike's phone buzzed in his pocket, an unknown number, area code 3 states away. He answered without thinking. "Deputy Henley?" A man's voice rasped on the other end, thin and distant like a bad radio signal. "You shouldn't have opened the shed." The line clicked dead. Mike froze, the dial tone humming in his ear like a warning that the shed's secrets were only the beginning, and the man who left them behind was still watching. The dial tone felt like a nail vibrating in Mike's ear. He lowered the phone slowly, thumb hovering over redial, but there was nothing to call back. No number, just dead air, a warning left hanging in the empty front room where the air felt too cold for June. Beth was on her feet before he could speak. "Who was it?" she demanded, voice sharp enough to slice the stale silence. Mike shook his head. "Didn't say, just a voice. Said we shouldn't have opened the shed." He forced the next words out, each syllable tasting like rust. It was a man's voice, older, raspy. Could have been him. Beth crossed her arms, squeezing her elbows tight like she was holding herself together by the seams. "You think it was Stephen?" Mike didn't answer. He didn't have to. The question was leaking through the thin walls of the house, settling into the floorboards, the porch swing, the patch of grass behind the shed where the dirt still sagged like a bad memory. Outside, the sun was creeping up behind a layer of low clouds. The yard looked smaller now, boxed in by yellow tape and uniformed men with plastic gloves and clipboards. Somewhere out there, the swing set swayed gently on its own, squeaking in the breeze. Torres cleared his throat, standing half in the doorway. "Deputy, sheriff's on his way. Wants you back at the station after this." Mike nodded, mind half a mile away already. "Secure the shed. Don't let anyone near it without me." He turned back to Beth. "Come on, we're going for a drive." She didn't argue. She just grabbed her old canvas bag from the floor, the strap frayed at the edge, and followed him out the door. They drove the old county road north, past the empty feed store, the rusted water tower, the Baptist church where Beth had buried her mother a year before Raymond and Emily vanished. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The only sound was the hum of the tires and the soft rattle of the glove box whenever they hit a pothole. Beth finally broke the silence when they passed the turnoff to the old Carter place. Just a sagging mailbox now, half buried in vines. "Do you really think he killed my dad?" Mike kept his eyes on the road. "I don't know yet, maybe not directly. But if that was Stephen on the phone, if he's the one who buried that gun, then he was here that day. He knew about the shed." Beth stared out her window, her reflection ghosting back at her from the glass. "He wanted Emily. That summer, he told me he'd take her away if I didn't drop the custody fight. He said my dad was poisoning her against him, said he'd do what he had to do." Mike's knuckles whitened on the wheel. Do what he had to do. Words that could mean anything in this part of the world, where fences didn't always keep trouble out, and a man's pride could rot him from the inside out. He turned off the main road onto a smaller gravel path that led to the old Carter property. The place had been left to rot after Carter disappeared. The barn caved in, the house stripped for copper and scrap. But the land was still there, a stubborn patch of thorn and tangle that never quite gave up the ghosts buried in its soil. They pulled up near the gate. Mike killed the engine. The silence that followed felt like someone holding their breath. Beth stepped out first, gravel crunching under her sneakers. She pushed the old gate open with her shoulder. The hinges gave a low metallic groan that echoed off the empty fields. The house was just a skeleton now, sagging porch, window frames like eye sockets staring back at them. Somewhere inside, a bird rustled in the rafters. "Why here?" Beth asked, voice softer now. "What are we looking for?" Mike held up the stick figure drawing, the one they'd pulled from the crate under the shed. He tapped the big dark block behind the little girl. "This shape? It's not the shed. It's bigger. I think she drew a trailer, or a truck, something that could move." Beth frowned. "My dad never owned a truck." "Stephen did," Mike said quietly. "An old camper. He used to park it out here when he was fighting with you, right?" Beth nodded slowly. "He said it was his escape hatch." She said the last two words like they tasted foul. They stepped over the broken threshold into the house. The floor sagged under their boots, boards splintered and warped from years of rain sneaking through holes in the roof. In what used to be the kitchen, sunlight speared through cracks in the boards, catching on old beer cans, yellowed newspapers, a broken folding chair half buried in mouse droppings. But it was the back door that made Mike stop cold. Nailed shut from the inside, splinters bristling out like old stitches. A rusted padlock dangled uselessly on one hinge. And just to the right of it, half hidden by peeling floral wallpaper, was a message scratched into the wood in jagged block letters. "I tried." Beth brushed her fingers over the words. "That's my dad's writing," she whispered. Mike's breath caught in his throat. "I tried," the same words from the note in the box under the shed, the same plea that had survived 15 years of rot and rumor and silence. Beth stepped back, eyes wide now. Why write this here? What was he trying to say? Mike crouched by the door, tracing the boards with his flashlight. His beam caught on something wedged between the baseboards, a scrap of old cloth, muddy and stiff. He tugged it free. Wrapped inside was a single brass key, dull and pitted with age. Etched into the key's head were 3 letters, barely visible in the beam. CSA. Beth leaned closer. "What the hell is that?" Mike turned the key over in his palm. "Carter Storage and Auto. It was Carter's side business. Old self-storage units behind the feed store. Been padlocked for years since he disappeared." He slipped the key into his pocket, mind already racing ahead. "Your dad didn't run, Beth. He hid something. Something he couldn't let Stephen get his hands on." She closed her eyes. "Emily?" Mike nodded, the shape of an answer pressing at the back of his skull like a ghost's cold hand. Outside, a truck rumbled past on the gravel road, trailing dust in the sunlight. Mike watched it disappear behind the overgrown hedgerow, wondering if Stephen Miller was behind the wheel, watching the gate, the yard, the old secrets clawing their way up through dirt that was never deep enough to hold the truth. He tapped the key against his palm, the metal ticking like a heartbeat. "Next stop," he said. "Storage unit." The storage facility behind Carter's old feed store hadn't seen a paying customer in almost 20 years. The sign still read, "Carter Storage and Auto," in flaking red paint, the phone number missing its last digit like an unanswered question. A rusted chain-link fence wrapped the yard like a bad memory, sections patched with bent wire and scraps of tin, old no trespassing signs curling at the corners. Mike cut the engine just outside the gate. The morning light was breaking through the clouds now, striping the cracked asphalt with pale streaks that made the place feel more abandoned than it looked in the dark. Beth sat rigid in the passenger seat, the old key pressed tight in her palm. Her knuckles were white. She hadn't spoken since they'd left the Carter house, just stared out the window, the word Emily on her lips, like a prayer she was too tired to finish. Mike leaned across her, gently prying the key from her fingers. "Stay here," he said. She turned to him, eyes raw but steady. "Like hell I will." He almost smiled, but didn't. Instead, he pocketed the key, shoved the door open, and stepped into the morning chill. Gravel crunched under his boots as he pushed through the gate. The latch gave way with a hollow clang that echoed across the lot. Rows of metal doors stretched ahead of them, 30 maybe, each painted the same sun-faded blue. Most were rusted shut, weeds pushing through the cracks in the pavement. A few still wore old padlocks, orange tags fluttering in the breeze. They found Unit 12 halfway down the second row. Its door was scratched, the paint blistered from years of sun and rain. A single chain looped through the latch, padlock hanging heavy against the metal like an iron heart. Mike slipped the brass key from his pocket. It fit the lock so neatly it felt staged, like someone had pressed pause on the world 15 years ago, just waiting for him to find it. Beth stood behind him, arms crossed so tight her shoulders trembled. "Do it," she said. The padlock clicked open with a dull snap that felt too loud in the quiet yard. Mike pulled the chain free, feeding it through his hands in slow coils. He pressed his palm flat against the cold metal door and lifted it inch by inch. The rollers shrieked in protest, then caught halfway up, leaving just enough space for them to duck under. Inside, the air was stale, sour with old oil and mildew. The only light came from a crack in the back wall, a thin blade that sliced through dust motes like falling snow. Against the far wall sat an old camper, dented green and white stripes barely visible under years of grime. Beth stepped past Mike, breath catching in her throat. "That's his," she whispered. "Stephen's camper. He used to park it behind my dad's garage. Said it was his getaway plan." Mike kept his hand near his holster. He stepped closer, boots crunching over dead leaves blown in under the door. The camper door was closed, its tiny window caked with a film of dirt that turned the glass opaque. He reached for the handle, found it unlocked. The door swung open on squealing hinges that made Beth flinch. Inside, stale air drifted out, carrying the dry tang of old coffee, mold, and something sweeter beneath it that made Mike's gut twist. A small table, 2 cracked vinyl seats, a mattress in the back bunk, stripped bare except for a thin blue blanket, bunched at the foot like someone had crawled out in a hurry. On the table sat a shoebox, the cardboard stained dark at the corners. Mike flipped the lid. Inside, Polaroids, yellowed letters, a worn leather wallet. He thumbed through the photos, each one a window into the past he wished he could shut. Emily at age 4, missing her 2 front teeth, grinning at a county fair. Grandpa Raymond at the local diner, caught mid-laugh by someone's hidden camera, and one Polaroid that made Mike's hand shake. Emily sitting in the camper's doorway, knees tucked to her chest, staring at someone just out of frame. Her eyes looked wrong, too wide, too empty for a 6-year-old holding a stuffed rabbit in her lap. Beth's breath hitched beside him when she saw it. Where was she? Where did he take her? Mike's mouth was dry. I don't know, but this... He tapped the edge of the photo. This was no accident. He kept her here. at least for a while. He flipped the Polaroid over, scrawled on the back in black marker, 4 days. Beth pressed a hand to her mouth. Her knees buckled and she grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. He kept her alive, she whispered. 4 days, after he took her. Mike's eyes swept the camper, the corners, the floor, every shadowed seam that might hide what the light couldn't see. He spotted it then, a loose floor panel under the table, its edge lifted just enough to catch a boot toe. He crouched, pried it free. Beneath it lay a metal cash box, same battered paint as the camper's trim. He forced it open with his pocket knife. Inside was a roll of faded film, 8mm, the kind no one used anymore. A single note was taped to it in the same blocky hand that haunted every inch of this case. "This proves it." Mike held it up to the sliver of light from the cracked wall. "Your dad hid this. He wanted someone to find it." Beth's eyes met his, hollow and burning all at once. "So why didn't the sheriff look for it back then? Why did they tell me to stop?" Mike didn't answer, because he knew the question was too big for either of them now. Too big for the storage unit, too big for the old shed. It was a question that had been buried under layers of silence, fear, and the town's stubborn refusal to believe the Baileys weren't the kind of family bad things happened to. He slipped the film into an evidence bag, sealing the past inside plastic like that would keep it from spilling out again. Beth turned away, wiping her eyes with the heel of her hand. Outside, wind rattled the chain-link fence. Somewhere beyond it, a car engine rumbled, slow, patient, just out of sight. Mike ducked back out through the storage door, squinting into the brightening day. On the far side of the lot, a dark sedan idled behind the fence. The windows were tinted black, the shape behind the wheel a shadow that didn't move. Beth stepped up beside him, voice low, tight as a noose. "Is that him?" Mike didn't answer. He just reached for his badge, for his phone, for his service pistol. Anything that might keep the shed's ghosts from crawling into daylight for good. The sedan's engine growled once, a predator clearing its throat. Then it rolled back, tires crunching slow over broken asphalt, disappearing behind a row of dead hedges that swallowed it whole. Mike let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He looked at Beth, at the Polaroid in her shaking hand, and knew the next truth was waiting on that old strip of film, ready to show them exactly how far a father might go to hide what he'd done. Mike barely slept the next night. He sat at his kitchen table, the old 8mm film canister rolling back and forth between his palms like a loaded coin flip. Outside, the town drifted toward dawn in slow breaths, a lone truck rumbling down Main Street, the hum of power lines, the far-off bark of a dog that seemed to echo all the way back to 1994. Beth was asleep on his living room couch, curled under an old blanket that smelled like stale coffee and cedar from the gun safe in the corner. She'd refused the offer of a hotel. "Not leaving your sight," she'd said, voice flat as the linoleum under her sneakers. On the table sat the evidence bag with the Polaroids, the drawing, the key that had unlocked a door nobody had bothered to check 15 years ago. And beside it, Mike's phone, screen lit with a grainy freeze frame, the opening shot of the digitized film. He'd found an old projector at the station's evidence room, but the bulb was shot. Torres, eager, sharp-eyed Torres, had converted the reel at a buddy's shop. Now Mike stared at the first frozen image, a patch of woods, a swing of the camera that caught the outline of the camper's door. Then a glimpse of Emily, small, still alive. Wrapped in a blanket too big for her shoulders, a stuffed rabbit pressed to her chest. The rabbit's ear was torn, a dark smudge near her cheek. Dirt or something worse. He clicked play. The footage jumped and staggered in old, washed-out color. The camera bobbed as whoever held it moved closer to the camper. Inside, Emily's eyes tracked the lens. She didn't speak. She didn't cry, just watched. A voice, muffled, too low to make out, murmured something near the mic. Then the camera panned to the shed behind the camper. The door was open. Grandpa Raymond stood inside, half shadow, pointing at something just out of frame. His mouth moved, but the tape carried no sound now. A breeze pushed the door wide enough to reveal the inside wall. Words scratched deep into the boards. "Help her." Mike paused it there. He scrubbed forward, frame by jittery frame. Emily again, this time sitting on the camper steps, eating from a small paper bag. The same army surplus coat draped over her shoulders like a shroud. A man's arm, the coat sleeve, nudged her to stay put. Stephen? It had to be. The same coat Beth swore she'd know anywhere. The same man who'd ghosted out of town just days before the flyers went up and the TV crews packed up their tripods when the story went cold. Mike's breath rattled in the back of his throat. Grandpa hadn't wandered off into the trees. He'd followed his granddaughter. He'd found her, hidden her, tried to keep her close. And someone, Stephen, had been there too, filming them like trophies. A floorboard creaked behind him. Beth stood there, hair mussed, her eyes swollen from a night that had offered no rest worth the name. She said nothing at first, just stared at the laptop screen frozen on Emily's blank face. Mike turned the screen so she could see better. He hit play. The final few seconds flickered in ugly half-light. Grandpa Raymond stepping forward, blocking the camera. He shoved the lens away, mouth moving, eyes wild. His hands, trembling, empty, gripped the frame. Then the film cut to black. Beth pressed her fingertips to her mouth. Her voice cracked when she spoke. He was trying to protect her. All these years I blamed him for losing her. He never lost her. He hid her. Mike let the silence sit there. The wind rattled the window screens. The town woke up, street by street, but in that kitchen, time refused to move. Beth reached out, touched the evidence bag with the Polaroids. He didn't bury her. He buried the truth. He wanted someone to find it when it was safe. Mike's phone buzzed. Torres again. He put it on speaker. Talk. Torres sounded breathless. Deputy, you told me to check Stephen Miller's last known. We ran his old bank records, dead ends mostly. But, get this. Someone using his Social Security number rented a trailer up near Dry Creek last month. Same fake name he used in '94. Beth's eyes snapped to Mike's. Dry Creek was 2 counties north, nothing but woods, old mining cabins, and hunters who liked to stay invisible. Torres kept going. I got the address. You want it? Mike's heart slammed in his chest. Text it now, and Torres, you don't tell the sheriff yet. This stays between us until I say otherwise. Beth whispered, We go tonight. Mike's jaw tightened. We're not waiting. We go now. He killed the call, grabbed his badge, his holster. The laptop screen still glowed behind him, frozen on Grandpa's wild, pleading eyes. Help her. The same words now ricocheted inside Mike's head, louder than the wind, louder than the questions that had kept him up for 15 years. He opened the front door. Dawn spilled over the town in pale ribbons that touched the edge of the yard, where a little girl once stood tossing a red frisbee to the only man who'd ever promised to keep her safe. Beth's hand brushed his arm, her voice low and final. We finish this. Mike nodded. The last pieces were out there, waiting where the trees swallowed secrets and old trucks rusted behind locked sheds. He stepped off the porch, the morning grass wet against his boots, the promise of the past humming like a live wire under his skin. Somewhere up near Dry Creek, Stephen Miller was still moving pieces on a board he thought he owned. But this time, Mike was coming to flip it over for good. They reached Dry Creek just after 10 that morning, though up here, time didn't feel like it moved in hours. It drifted in sunbeams, cutting through pine needles, in the hush of wind rolling over an abandoned logging road, in the crunch of gravel that sounded too loud when you didn't want to be heard. Mike killed the engine a quarter-mile from the turnoff. The truck coasted to a stop under a canopy of branches that nearly brushed the windshield. Beside him, Beth stared straight ahead, eyes dry now, burned out of tears hours ago. She wore the same denim jacket, sleeves rolled tight over her wrists like she'd bound herself up so nothing could break loose until this was done. Through the trees, they could just make out the outline of the trailer. White siding dulled gray, streaks of rust hugging the seams where the rain had been eating it for years. A single propane tank leaned on cinder blocks by the side, half sunk into the ground. Smoke drifted from a small stovepipe. Someone was home. Mike checked his sidearm, badge clipped to his belt in plain sight. The local sheriff didn't know he was here yet. That was deliberate. Too many good old boys who'd look the other way. If a ghost like Stephen Miller wandered back into town, one more local legend better left buried. Beth touched his elbow. "I'm going in too." Mike held her eyes. "You stand behind me. You don't talk first. You don't run." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her hand dropped away, her shoulders squared. She'd waited 15 years for this front door, this patch of scrubby dirt and pine that held the last thread of Emily's story. They stepped off the logging track, boots slipping on old needles and broken beer cans. Every crunch underfoot sounded like thunder in Mike's chest. His pulse thudded against the badge pinned to his shirt, same badge he'd worn when he knocked on Beth's porch in '94 to tell her they'd found nothing. Not this time. They crossed the clearing in a slow, steady line. No surprises, no sudden moves. Mike's hand hovered over his holster. He knocked once. The door rattled on its hinges like it hadn't been opened in years, but a shuffle inside told him it had. Silence. Then the knob turned. The door opened 3 inches, then 6. A face peered through the gap, hair thin, wild, a week's worth of stubble shading skin gone paper pale. Stephen Miller, or what was left of him. He stared at Mike first, then at Beth. His mouth twitched into something like a grin but cracked halfway there, leaving nothing but a crooked line under eyes that didn't know how to look away. "Beth," he rasped, "you look good." Beth didn't flinch. "Where is she?" Stephen's laugh was dry bark, no humor, just an echo of what it used to be when he stood in her doorway promising he'd come back sober. "She's gone, Beth. Always was." Mike stepped forward, boots kissing the threshold. "Where's Grandpa Raymond?" he asked quietly. Stephen's eyes flicked sideways, teeth bared just a hair. "Dead men don't talk, Deputy." Mike's hand dropped to the holster. "We have the film, Stephen, the shed, the drawings. Your coat in that photo, the storage unit. This ends here." For a heartbeat, Stephen's grin collapsed into a tremor at the corner of his mouth. He looked older than Mike remembered from the grainy license photo they'd dug up. Older and smaller somehow, like the years had squeezed him dry and left only a husk that knew just enough to be afraid. Beth took a step forward. The floor creaked under her boot. "You stole her," she said, voice low and flat as a funeral prayer. "You took her from my father. From me." Stephen's eyes darted to the woods behind them, an animal hunting an exit. "I didn't take her. She was mine. You were going to ruin her. Raymond was going to ruin her. He couldn't protect her from what comes next." Mike's voice was ice. "What did you do?" Stephen's eyes locked on Beth's. "She's not where you think she is. She's not under that shed. She's not in any grave they'll ever find. Your father knew. He tried. God knows he tried. But you can't bury what you owe, Beth. Some things just keep breathing." He stepped back. The door swung wider, enough for Mike to see the inside of the trailer. A filthy cot, a battered cooler, and pinned to the far wall, under yellowed tape and layers of old news clippings, a single red frisbee. The same one they'd pulled from the shed. Or another one. Mike's breath caught. Beth's knees buckled, but her voice didn't break. "Where is she, Stephen?" Stephen leaned against the doorframe like he was tired. "Where she always was, where he left her, where I buried the rest so you'd come looking." Mike's hand was on the grip of his pistol now, half raised, but Stephen just smiled, a small, broken grin that cracked through all the lies at once. "You dig enough holes," Stephen whispered. "Sometimes you forget which ones are empty." A flicker of motion. Stephen's hand dipped behind the door. Mike stepped in fast, shoulder first, pistol up, catching Stephen's wrist as a dull flash of steel glinted in the gloom. A small revolver hit the trailer floor with a soft thunk. Beth pushed past them. A sound broke from her throat, something wild and raw, as she grabbed Stephen's collar. Years of silence and rage burst through her teeth. "Where is she?" Stephen's eyes rolled, mouth working, but no words left. He choked on his breath, gnarled fingers clawing at hers, until Mike pulled her off, cuffing Stephen's wrists behind his back with cold steel clicks that echoed like a gavel in the pine hush. Outside. Mike dragged him out into the clearing. Sunlight split through the branches, washing over the old camper, the broken trailer step, the dry dirt that had hidden secrets no one was supposed to find. Beth stood behind them, shoulders heaving. Her eyes found Mike's, not asking for answers, just bracing for the one she knew would never come clean. Mike bent close, voice low at Stephen's ear. "Tell her, now." Stephen just stared past him, eyes glassy, pinned to the trees, the sky, the wind whispering through the needles. He coughed once, a wet rattle in his throat. "Dig," he rasped. "Same place he tried? By the swing, by the fence." He laughed then, a dry, shredded thing that caught in his throat and died there. They found the spot an hour later, the old yard behind the Bailey place, near the swing set, where Grandpa used to push Emily, while Beth stood at the kitchen window, watching her girl fly through the summer dusk. They dug where the fence line buckled, where the grass grew wild over roots that twisted down into the dark. Mike's shovel hit something solid, then soft, then nothing at all but cold air and a hole that went deeper than they thought. Inside, scraps of fabric, a single children's shoe, the same rainbow lace, and beside it, wrapped in a child's blanket so small it fit in both palms, was the stuffed rabbit, its ear torn, a smudge on its side. No bones, no body. Just a hole that whispered that some ghosts never leave because they were never truly buried, only hidden, folded into the roots of the places they loved. When they lowered the flashlight, the soil caught the edge of the light like a door cracking open. Beth stood above it, knees in the dirt, fingers tracing the ear of the rabbit like she was trying to memorize it all over again. Mike didn't speak. He just watched her, watched the swing creak in the wind, watched the fence line flicker under the trees that had never told the truth. He knew they'd file the papers, process the scene, write the reports that said what people wanted to read. No remains. Case unresolved. Cold. But under the dirt, in the hush of the yard, Grandpa Raymond once guarded with his tired hands, the truth stayed breathing, just out of reach, where the frisbee once flew and the girl once laughed. And in the rustle of the trees above them, Mike could almost hear her, small feet pounding across the grass, the slap of a plastic disc in the air, a promise that what was lost could be found, but only if you were willing to dig deeper than you ever thought you could.